Our third guest for today, Mr. Sudhanshu Vats, is presently the Deputy Managing Director at Pidilite Industries Limited, which is truly an Indian multinational with strong Indian roots. A digitally savvy marketer in today's environment is an asset to any business. An alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad, he has a career spanning 30 years across the FMCG and media sectors with a track record of propelling significant business growth and creating long-term value for all stakeholders of the company. He spent about 20 years at Unilever in India in sales, marketing, and general management roles. During his long tenure at Unilever, he shaped many popular household brands we use, most notably Lipton, Vim, Wheel, Surf, Rin, Lifebuoy, and Lux. Mr. Vats spent 8 years as the MD and Group CEO of Viacom 18 Media Private Limited. During this period, he profitably grew the company 3 times over by building a strong portfolio of direct-to-consumer digital offerings and strengthening data science and analytics a little ahead of, I think, the time in the system then. He has future-proofed the media company that is admired for its culture, quality of talent, and progressive people policies. He's an inspirational leader and mentors a lot of young CXOs, many of whom started their career with him. Education is his giving space. We look forward to hearing your perspective, Mr. Vats, on Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. May I request Mr. Bharat Khanna, Director of the club, to present a token of our appreciation to Mr. Vats. Thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. Sudhanshu Vats to address us.
Thank you. Thank you, Milind. And I think first, Hari Om, good morning and to all of you. Let me first start by a few thank yous. I think the first thank you to Vivek Krishnani for reaching out and offering me this opportunity. I was traveling to the US, as Milind just now said, but I think it is his and Milind's persistence that I'm standing here in front of you. So thank you for that. Also, a thank you to my wife, because I think my association with Swamiji is through my wife, Diksha Vats. She is more associated with Chinmaya mission than I am. So I think a big thank you to her for me being here today. I think the challenge following Sri Ajay Piramal and Sri Renuka Ramnath is what do you talk about the subject after this. But I think the good thing is, as I was intently listening to them, what I will attempt to do in the next 15 to 20 minutes is build on it. I will perhaps repeat a few points because I think they are worth repeating, but at the same time try and bring in my experiences in various organizations on this concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, how the concept has actually been practiced to a very large extent, and how some of those examples could be useful for us as we build it on from here. And I will use a simple framework of adding 3 more C's to commerce. So to commerce, I will add culture, and I'll talk a bit about it. Sri Ajay Piramal and Renuka both spoke about that as well. Swamiji also spoke about values, and I think therefore culture. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. The second C I'm going to talk about is community, and that fully plays out to looking at creating value in the entire ecosystem, and I think it begins with community and people all around us, and how do we look at that. And lastly, conscience. I think, businesses over a long period of time are built with conscience. So if I was to then look at the 3 C's, basically culture, community, and conscience, and I will throw in examples of 3 organizations, Unilever, where I spent, or Hindustan Unilever more precisely, where I spent about 2 decades, Viacom 18, which I had the privilege to run for just under 1 decade, and now Pidilite, where I've spent over 18 months or just about 2 years. So I think, but I'll share examples from all of them to bring alive all these things. So first and foremost, I think, let me start with this concept. And before I get into this, let me talk a little bit about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, our concept, and I think when I reflect on it, and what I think is unique to India, our culture, and therefore perhaps translates into everything which we do, including commerce in this country. And it doesn't matter whether some of these companies are multinational companies, as long as they've had a strong presence in India, they are Indian companies to me, or they are Indian companies, or which is the case may be. So Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, if I look at, I think, Srimati Meghna Patel started talking about it, and every speaker spoke about it then, is that, and they use this, we've all heard this, unanimous Roma, sab mit gaye jahan se, baki raha hai lekin Hindustan hamara. And I think, we spoke about this piece, but I think the reason to ask is, why is this culture, why has this culture sustained? What has made it sustained? And Swamiji spoke about Sanatan Dharma and about how different things have come. But I think he also spoke beautifully about a concept of flexibility or adaptability. I think we as a culture are a very adaptable culture, very open culture, very welcoming culture, very patient culture. And I think these are all virtues and values which are very, very useful in building one world and one society, because that's very important if we have to continue to build for the future and for the world. And I think we've done this because I think we've been blessed to have, Gurujis, to have learnings, to have scriptures, which over a period of time have taught us. And sometimes they have taught us through stories, which we may have learned, which we may have read. Sometimes these are stories which we've heard from our grandparents. Sometimes these are, this is literature which is perhaps there in our education and can keep on getting better. But that is what has shaped us. And that is what is shaping the commerce in this country. And that is what I think has a huge potential to be able to shape the commerce of the future for the world. And so therefore, let me first talk about the values and the culture element. So I'll draw your example to 70s now. So some of you who've been there for that long or remember those stories, I think this was a period when there was price control and there was again inflation and so on and so forth. But the one lesson which Unilever followed at that point in time, or Hindustan Lever, as it was basically the company called in those days, is distribution of Lifebuoy. And Lifebuoy was a large selling soap. And the distribution of Lifebuoy, they would never allow any hoarding of that to happen. They would ensure that Lifebuoy is equitably distributed town after town, market after market, and outlet after outlet. So I think that principle of equity and ensuring that you do that did two things. I think one, it brought enormous amount of goodwill for the organization amongst the people, because they realized that this is an organization which cares for everyone. I think because it's not taking the advantage at this point in time, but and ensuring that everybody gets that. I think that's a value which is important. I saw it there, and I have now read it and I hear stories of the founder at Pidilite, Shri B.K. Parekh. I think the same thing, when VAM went up, he said, VAM prices may have gone up, but we are not going to take advantage of this. And Pidilite in the 70s and 80s was sitting on very high stock of VAM at that point in time when the prices were going up. But we did not translate the prices of the market to profit. We actually used the price at which we had bought and equitably distributed it again at that point in time, and in building the brand Fevicol. So one of the stories which is there again in that. So therefore, if you look at, I think, and I'm giving a few examples of values because I think they can keep going on. I think building a culture in an organization, living by values which you believe in, and perhaps standing for at least one value, I think, which is Swamiji said, and perhaps going forward with that is extremely important. I think that's the one piece which I would talk about from a culture point of view. Let me also briefly touch upon here the concept of diversity, which Ajay Piramal talked about. Renuka also spoke about that.
I think when I was at Viacom 18, one of the things which we started to say is that we will drive diversity in our organization and we'll genuinely drive it. And I said that we will measure diversity at every level. And here I'm talking about gender diversity. So I'm saying we're going to measure it at every level. And in a period of about 6 to 8 years, we were able to take our diversity numbers, so our intake at the base level was 49%, almost 50-50, which I think was pretty decent, so 49%. But what we were very, very successful in doing, and which I think I would credit the team and all of us, is that at the top table, we had 4 out of 11, which is about 30% plus. I think getting that to top level at 4 out of 11 is really hard. I think getting the 49 at the base level is relatively easier. But the work which we did on women at Viacom 18 is called WAVE. And I think all the work which we did in terms of, and this is about, I'm talking about well before the maternity leave and all these things and paternity pieces, which the government of India has later brought. But we talked about maternity leave, maternity benefits, we talked about women coming back after work, we talked about paternity leaves, and so on and so forth. And each of those at different level. In order to genuinely drive diversity, I think was, and we were then acknowledged by UN as basically, so therefore, for myself as well, as he for she, which is basically the leaders who have sort of supported this piece. So I think that, again, is an important piece. So therefore, the first element in building commerce is culture. And I think it's about values, it's about what you stand for, what you do. I think the next one I want to talk about is communities. And I think Renuka also spoke about that in the context of delivery. But communities, I think, if businesses are built sustainably, they will directly or indirectly help communities. I think there is no debate on that. I think if we can consciously do that, the better it is. The multiplier effect of that is enormous. And let me give you some examples of this again over my journey through these 2 or 3 organizations. I think first and foremost, on building communities, what comes to my mind is Shakti Ammas. Many of you may have seen some of those movies of Hindustan Unilever, but I was actually part of some of the work which we did in the initial years. I remember when I went into this remote village in Andhra Pradesh, we had started the experiment there. And I don't understand Telugu, but I had a person who was interpreting for me. That Shakti Amma, actually, she had tears in her eyes. And she said, it's not the money that you have basically which I'm making through the work which I'm doing with you, which is important, but it's the respect which I'm getting in my village, in my society. And for her, the respect which she was getting was the most important thing. And she said, beta, for this, you and your company shall always be blessed. And I think, that's the piece. And then that entire thing of working through communities and growing that, I think is a very, very important piece which Unilever did. I think if I now shift to Pidilite, I think in Pidilite's journey of building Fevicol, we all love Fevicol ads. They are lovely ads. But I think the brand actually is built with the carpenters, with that community. And I think over a period of time, as Pidilite now, we work with contractors, carpenters, some of these people, and we now work with almost 1 million of them. And these are like our extended family at Pidilite. And now, thanks to technology, which Ajay Piramal spoke about, they are all connected through apps to us. And so much so that in the period of COVID, we took care of all of them and their families as well. So some of the stories which we hear about them now on the work which we did for them, I think during COVID, is an extended family, because these have been people associated with us. These are people who build these brands as we go forward. The brands are not built by advertisements alone or by placing it at the dealers or in the stores, but also working with these users and with the community and building that community. And interestingly, in turn, this community is now giving back to community. So there is a concept of, in December, on one of the days of December, we do a concept of Shramdan, where all the people who work with us, this is 1 million+ people, or this community of users, work for free for their societies on that one particular day, in whatever work they are doing. And then we have a concept of rickshaw open, which is basically, again, so therefore we planted 16 lakh. So the force multiplier which comes once you build these communities, 16 lakh trees on one day. I think therefore, and if you can do that, I think because that's the way you work with it. And today, technology enables you that the relationship which you built over a period of time gives you that confidence, and therefore, that's the piece around communities. So I think building communities in and around what we do, and I think in our businesses, is extremely important. It strengthens our businesses, it strengthens our brand, but more importantly, it makes the business sustainable and the society self-sustainable. And I think therefore, this community piece is extremely important, and I think we do talk about it and we keep doing work, and all good businesses, by the way, do this. And I think, Renika spoke about delivery. I think they do a bunch of work. Everybody does a lot of work with the communities. But I think that's an area which we should continue to do even more so. I think moving on to the conscience part of this, I think this is one. I remember the phrase of Lord Leverhulme. I think, which is actually was there at the 165 by 166 Backway Reclamation Office on a plaque as you entered there. I think the phrase very clearly said that no business, how big or small, built on conscience is the most important business. And small businesses built on conscience are far more valuable than big businesses which are not built on conscience. So therefore, the role of conscience in building businesses, and I think you can see it now in the other businesses which have been built as well. So if you look at the way, the values and the conscience with which Pidilite has been built by the founder chairman and now being taken over by Madhukar Bhai as well, I think builds that. So the building in conscience and bringing in soul, I think is very important, and that our culture teaches us. Because you see, many times we get carried away too much by intellect. But it is not just intellect. It's a combination of mind, heart, and soul that builds sustainable organizations, sustainable institutions, and that, in my arguably, also build leaders. It is hard to measure some of those. It's very hard to measure how is the person bringing his heart into it. It's very hard to measure what is how's the person bringing soul. It's very easy to measure some of the other aspects, especially the intellectual aspects, and that's why that gets a premium. But it's a combination of three that creates magic. And I think that's why role of conscience, that is the other C, which is very, very important. So therefore, from my point of view, I think commerce built with the right culture, with values, standing by, working with and developing communities, and always built with conscience, will deliver, and India has the right opportunity to be able to do that. And I think coming back to the concept, before I wind up on Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one family, one earth, and one vision, I'm reminded of the DNA test, Swamiji. So when you were talking about DNA test, I was reflecting about 18 to 20 years back in my career when I was the global vice president for a brand for Unilever. And the debate for in any of the global forums, particularly in laundry category, the debate was, because laundry category is one of the most established categories because, the detergents and all that were there. And Unilever started out as a company in late 19th century and actually stepped out in very early 20th century. So this is pre-communication era, pre-air travel era. So most of these brands were built locally in each of those places. So they would turn around and say, our brand is different. Our brand name is different. The way the brand looks is different. What we do, everything around this brand is very different. And as the global vice president, the job at that point in time is to say how it is one, how there are so many commonalities in this. And that was the entire thing. So as you were doing the DNA test, we did a lot of research. So I think I just wanted to share with the audience that there are two pieces of research which are important, and I'll just give you a glimpse into that, which helped us build some of these brands. And I think some of them are very, very popular now and very well known, and I'll talk about them as well. But I think the one work which we did is we did a work on human needs and human needs, human behaviors. So interestingly, and we kept distilling it down. And we then came down to 15 fundamental human needs. And we said that big brands are built around those 15 fundamental human needs. And these human needs are love, respect, belonging. So these are things like these. These are universal. They don't know any language. They don't know any culture. They're universal. And I think if you build your brand around these, you'll be able to do that. Second thing which we said is that the mother-child connection, and which you talked about as well, can build brands if you have the right way to do it and if you can bring out. So if you look at the entire campaign on dirt is good and daag achhe hain, is actually, and it is somewhat paradoxical, but it has now been adopted all over, including India. And at that point in time, India was also resisting, saying, oh no, we have very different this thing, and so on. You know, in India, daag achhe hain will not work. You know, dirt is not good in India, and so on and so forth. But the concept, and it is now, you may have read that, you know, Surf Excel as a brand, actually, and I was closely associated, it's crossed $1 billion in revenue as well, and daag achhe as a campaign has done exceedingly well. So I think the ability to now, to peel, and you have to just peel so the externalities sometimes show the difference. But if you have the capability of peeling those externalities, which is what we wear, the language we use, how we look, if you can peel that, I think you find that we are one, we are all the same. And I think that's why I'm so moved by this concept, and I think that's why, you know, this concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I think is something which India has rightfully adopted for G20 and has the capability of sharing to the world and bringing out the best through this. So I would sign off by saying that as a culture, and because of one of the things also about our culture is paradox is a paradigm in India. So I think, you know, two extremes easily meet in India. And I think that's why for commerce, and I think both the erudite speakers before me spoke about it, but if I could use another paradoxical phrase and say that if we can share that to the world, I think we have to develop capitalist, socialist concepts for commerce. So it is, and I think they are two paradoxes. So when you talk about capitalism and you talk about socialism, you say these are two extreme distinct. But if we can develop capitalist, socialist models, designs, and concepts for commerce, I think that's a great gift we could give to the world, which the world would benefit from. And hopefully, we would build, as we say, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one family, one earth, one vision. And a vision which is about harmony, it's about healthiness, and it's about happiness. So build a happy, healthy, and harmonious world. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vats. I think the audience will agree that we were right in pursuing you relentlessly. So thank you for being here and indulging us. Culture is shaping the commerce of the world. Paradox is a paradigm in India. I think you hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much. I personally believe my question paper was leaked, so I don't have questions of my own. All the three speakers have addressed most of what I thought I would pen down while I was to be the moderator. If you could just indulge me and join me on the dais, Ms. Ramnath and Sudhanshuji. We have some more questions from the audience. We will be skipping the formal tea break in the interest of time. Those who wish to indulge and enjoy a cup of tea, please, we request you to and invite you to go ahead and have some. But in the meantime, we'd love to take some questions for our speakers. I repeat, and as nauseating it as it might be, use the pad, write your name, the organization to whom it is addressed to, and please in caps, and please hand it over to our volunteers. That would help us. Thank you. Mukul bhai, are you able to just, thank you. Apologies again for running behind a little schedule. Both the speakers, please do indulge us. Thank you. Where can we begin with the question? So maybe while
Vivek,
we
you
wait,
can
I
keep
could...
sharing one as you keep scrolling the
Yeah.
others.
So while we wait, I could probably attempt to shoot out what I thought was not addressed. Artificial intelligence. Swamiji touched on it. Ajay Bhai touched on it. Boon or bane? I mean, rapid fire or some answer beyond that? I'd like to open it out to both of you, or all three of you for that matter. So artificial intelligence, is it a global threat or an opportunity? And the perspective not restricted only to losing jobs. I mean, yeah? So your thoughts.
The good news is that a lot of very intelligent minds, engineers, are already putting out a lot of videos on viral saying if you don't contain it, it will kill you. So that's a very good thing. So the world is bringing balance in itself instead of just saying go, 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 go. AI is going to be so good. So I would say I'm sincerely hoping that our government is looking at what could be the dark side of AI and bring regulations ahead of time. Otherwise, a very wonderful thing for human productivity can become a big danger for society.
No, I totally agree, I think, to what Renuka said. I think it's a very powerful thing at one level. I think if you look at ChatGPT, it's like magic, So I remember one dealers meet we just did for Pidilite dealers, and on live we said, can you write a poem on Pidilite dealers? And it was a wonderful poem written, and I think, it is, so at one level it is really, really good, but I think the ethical questions around it, and I think how do we look at, and I'm saying, and I was reading about autonomous cars as well, how to bringing in laws which will ensure that you are able to, how do you program them, what happens, what are the laws that will govern it, what will happen in certain circumstances between when you have to choose between, in an Indian context, a cattle on the road and a small child on the road, and how will you distinguish? What are those ethical issues which are there, I think are very, very important, and I think we have to keep on discussing it, keep on having dialogue around it, keep on framing certain regulation, which is not stifling, but it is important that it continues to sort of give us the direction. I think that's very important because it is, and it's not about jobs at all, because I think jobs is the least of the worry, because I think the same thing was said when machines came, same thing was said when, so I think jobs is not the worry at all. I think that's not a problem. I think the problem is around the bigger ethical issues, and I think we have to be very careful about it, as Renuka said. I think that's the key point there. But it's a very important tool, very critical for India, I think.
So I just want to add one point.
Absolutely.
I have been a student of software programming, and when I was in my college, my project was on artificial intelligence. So, of course, I was very excited by it, and today to see it, the applications of it are very fantastic and wonderful. I also feel, like both of them said, ethical issues and many other challenges which are there need to be addressed. We cannot deny it. We cannot say it cannot be there and it cannot be banned and all that. That will never happen. But I also have a lot of hope in both ways, because artificial intelligence will bring in, like how Ajay Bhai spoke about, technology has bridged so many gaps and so many things we are able to reach. That way artificial intelligence will create many opportunities, and it will also benefit a lot of people, especially down to the weaker section itself. I also feel that it will bring much more opportunities for natural intelligence also to be developed. Even considering that suppose jobs are taken away, then many people will have to come to us. They will have to focus more on yoga, they will have to focus more on spirituality, on Vedanta, and go deeper into it. I mean, just jokes apart, but to use artificial intelligence very cleverly and clearly and ethically, that strong spiritual backing is a very important aspect. So natural intelligence and artificial must go hand in hand. The development of both needs to happen. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Swamiji. In a lighter vein, that was a good marketing pitch. But going forward, Renuka-ji, I have a question for you. Does your definition of value include sustainability integrated in their operations? Ms. Gauri Bhatia, somebody who's involved in healthcare. Yeah.
absolutely, most certainly, but it's a good point. I've not called that out as a value. We have so many values written down. Maybe I should go back, but it is in our way of life. It's in our practice. In every company, how do we bring the concept of sustainability? But I would also say that, today capital comes with these strings. It's not a choice anymore. So when we started 12 years back, we took money from Commonwealth Development Corporation of UK, who had, it comes from UK government's budgetary allocation, and it had its own objectives, and therefore they would put a lot of conditions on us on how will we fulfill on what we call as ESG, environment, social, and governance obligations. And it was a check in the box for me. And I used to think this is just adding cost to my business, right? Because I have to get a consultant who has to approve that every company is complying with the UK requirement of ESG. Then fast forward another 5 years, it dawned on me that this is so real. This is such an important issue to be kept front and center. And we started with a very simple thing. I went to Credit Suisse, which is arguably a very blue-blooded, uppity investment bank, and they had water in glasses, in a jar, as opposed to plastic bottles. Somehow it just rang a bell in me. I said, hey, if Credit Suisse is doing this, what are you doing, right? We came back, and the beauty about the teams is you come back and you tell your team, CS had this, we should eliminate plastic bottles. Within a week, we had matkas beautifully decorated with beautiful write-ups on why it is important to not use plastics, encouraging everybody to drink from matkas. And another team computed how much plastic we have eradicated, and therefore how we have contributed to the carbon footprint. And from there started the journey. And today, I have a very, very senior person we have hired from a very polluting industry. So he's an environment specialist. And we are looking at how do we make ESG a differentiator? How do we become a showcase company for building responsible business? So long answer, sustainability is at the center of everything we do.
And combine three questions into one, if I can. I began with one of mine, and then I'll add the other two that have come in from the audience. Sudhanshuji, this is for you. Is it possible to achieve success today being ethical? Does the system compel one to be unethical? How can you practice being ethical in an unethical ecosystem and reduce corruption in a global sense? It's a mouthful, but just to add, there's somebody from a small business background who asked, how do you manage all ethics and sound principles for small businesses and survive? So it's not scale, it's universal. And lastly, I'm just going to throw in one more. Can corporates create a sustainable employment culture against a hire and fire approach? So all of these, if you could, just together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, is it possible to be ethical? I think it is possible to be ethical. I think if you look at, I'm a marathon runner. So I ran Boston, and that's why I'm coming from US now. I think life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think the mistake we sometimes make in different stages of our careers or in businesses and all that is we treat it as a sprint. And we look at that sprint and that phase and say, how do I win that? And at one level, it's not incorrect, but if you look at it as a sprint, you are right in saying that how do I win this sprint, this 100-meter race? In order for me to win this 100-meter race, I need to do X, Y, Z. But my view is if you convert that 100-meter race into a 42-kilometer run, saying that I'm going to run for 42 kilometers, I'm going to pace it at my own level, and I'm going to run it well, it is a race. So there, I'm not debating that's not a race. So I think it is possible. All good businesses, longer term, are built ethically. Ethics is very important. If you are not an ethical business, one day or the other, you will go bust. And you can see that it's happening so more often than not now. Size doesn't matter any longer. So I think there are impediments. It is also incorrect for me to say that there are no impediments. I think in the society which you work with, there are issues, but there are workarounds around that. There are ways in which what you will say, what you will stand for. So therefore, it's important to build sustainable businesses, to build business around value. It'll sustain in the longer term, and it'll help you to sort of build that business. So I think that's one part. I think on the, what was the other, what was the other question?
Employment.
The sustainable employment question. I think, see, different people will give you different answers for this. I think technology industry has a different view. I don't come from technology industry. But most of our companies, if you look at it, traditional companies, if I can use that word, we don't follow a strict hire and fire policy. Actually, as again, in India, if you look at even during COVID, many companies did not retrench. So therefore, you know, Pidilite did not retrench at all. Many companies resorted to looking at salaries and perhaps working around that, no variable, no bonus. So I think we are a more communal society, we are more community-oriented society, so therefore it comes a bit more naturally to us that in all spheres it's not hire and fire. But it depends from business to business, and I think there are sometimes requirements, and it also depends on what is your own temperament. Because nowadays, I think one is about hire and fire, which is at the company level, but at the same time, there is this concept of moonlighting and gig working, and so therefore, I'm saying we have to take a view. If we are a gig worker, then hire and fire is not a problem for us, and if we are the other types, then there are. So to me, I think there are different strokes for different folks, and there are different types of companies available. So it depends on what you want to do, where you want to work, you'll find your answer. So I think that's the way it is. But in an Indian context, in general, it is not such a big thing, at least in India even now, and may not be also, because I personally believe that we need to find a balance. I think being too capitalist, which is where I sound Milind, I ended also. I personally feel there are issues now with the American society. They've got to reinvent themselves. They will have to rethink capitalism because, you know, I was there in that country and it's such a rich country, but the quality of service is so poor. Why is the quality of service poor? Because they don't pay well. Their minimum wage is problem in big cities. Why is the minimum wage problem? Because they don't want to pay. They don't want to pay, like Renuka was saying, because they want to make profits now. But think of it, you are a rich country. Don't you deserve good service? Forget about a person traveling from India. I'm saying in your own country, there are 300 million people. You deserve good service. If you deserve good service, please pay well. If you have to pay well, then be a bit more. So I think that's the way up. Why are you suffering bad service? I don't understand as a society. So therefore, I think we have to reinvent this piece. I think, you know that.
Is that possibly a social consequence of entitlement? Just a thought. The cycle that of what life goes through, which leads me actually to a question for Swamiji, in line with maybe entitlement and the fact that about responsibility. It's not mine, somebody else needs to take care of it, I need to get taken care of, etc., in multiple formats. So with the background of Dharma, how do you make a nation responsible and to achieve great heights? Where does it begin? Does it begin from a government telling you what to do?
So it always begins from both ends of the ladder. It has to be a top-down approach also, and it has to go from bottoms up also. Top-down approach in the sense, if you just see what has happened in the last few years, much more accountability, responsibility. When the Prime Minister says that I am the Pradhan Sevak, and the Prime Minister says that I will give you the report of what I have done in the last year. Now Prime Minister himself is becoming accountable, responsible, and showing and leading the way, and that's what our Dharma says, Yad yad acharati shreshtaha tat ted eva itaro janaha. So from the top, if the leaders set that benchmark that we take responsibility, we are accountable, and we will ensure that the people to whom we are responsible for, we will explain what has been done, why it has been done, how much it has been done. That sets a very great standard for everyone else to follow. And we see so much work happening also, not to discount from anyone else who has been doing any work, but you see the change in the culture itself. I heard Anand Mahindra ji speaking the other day, and he said that corruption is virtually non-existent at the top brass right now. That was a statement coming from such a great industrialist. Was not, it's not an ordinary statement coming. So one is, it comes from top, bottom also. And second is it goes from bottom to top in the sense that every single individual, when they take on the responsibility with the attitude of nation above self, then the whole nation can become responsible. It cannot be only a few people. Again, we hold some people responsible for certain things and say, put the blame very easily, government should do this, or this organization should do this, or that person should do that, like you said. But what did I do? What is my duty first? If I change, then the world around me changes. So each one has to take their responsibility, that our culture says, but that will come when we have a higher vision. So our scriptures explain about that so clearly. If Bhagwan Ram put nation above self and Sita ji agreed with his decision that she went to the forest, she was sent to the forest, that's a fantastic explanation of how a nation is put above the individual self and sacrifice is done. You see the contrast happens in Mahabharata, where he is not able to put the nation above the self, and Dhritarashtra lands up in creating destruction of 40 million people. So you see the responsibility, how it comes. If a person has that vision, that nation is above self, all things will come. It can be company, it can be culture, it can be family, it can be whatever that is. Altar of dedication, it can be anything. But that has to be there. Then integrity will come, then all these factors will come in where responsibility will not be a problem. Thank you.
So there is one question here. You spoke about purpose is needed more than money to build a business. What is the best way to define and articulate a founder's purpose in a business context? So, a great question. I think I'll just take my example to answer this because I don't want to theorize this. So when I left ICICI, I was 49 years old. I'd done professionally enough, worked very, very hard, made a name for myself, and by grace of God, had enough money to retire. So there was many advice coming from many quarters. That's again beauty of Indian families. And my mother, being my mother, she felt that I worked so hard to the abandon of my own health and well-being. She was the only one who said, I think you should do nothing and put your feet up, right? And my son said, Amma, I know whatever you play, you will win, so choose your game carefully, right? And my father would not be happy if I don't become the finance minister of this country. He's too ambitious for me. So he said, continue to do something. And I sat back and I asked myself, what should I be doing? And I went and spoke to I have a spiritual guru, and I said, Guruji, I think I am blessed with this capability to make good investments and to choose good entrepreneurs and guide them to build good businesses. And I said, they did in my introduction as well. And I genuinely get huge inner satisfaction to see the amount of jobs created. So when we have an investment, we played a very significant role in building PVR cinemas to the size and scale it is. Every time I go to watch a movie, I always look and count the number of people who are in uniforms. To see all these people got jobs and a hope in life because we made that bet, right? So there is so much inner satisfaction coming from bringing that knowledge at play to fulfill the dreams of many entrepreneurs who in turn create so many jobs, create wealth, create meaning, contribute to social good, bring the wealth back into the economy, and it is kind of an endless virtuous cycle. And if you have the capability to do it and make your own humble contributions to that ripple effect, how can you be selfish and say, I have made enough money, I have worked enough hard, I have made enough name for myself, and why should I do anything? Who am I here? If I turn it around and say, who gave you all this? Some institution, some bunch of bosses who tolerated me, some bunch of people who tolerated my mistakes, who made me who I am today, and I have to pass it forward. It is not mine. It belongs to the society. It has to go back from where it came. And therefore, I said to indulge yourself into laziness and entitlement is just a wrong thing to do. And that's how Multiples was really born. So I feel it is for each person to sit back and say, what has made me who I am? How can I therefore pass it forward? And that then gives the answer in terms of what is your core calling, and then gives you the idea to kind of go forward.
I'm sure we could go on and on in the interest of time and the commitment our speakers have given. In the same line, I just have one last question. Swamiji, there are lots of questions for you, but I think as a good host, we should offer it to our guests. There's a question from a student, and I think I'd leave it to all three of you to answer if you like. As a student, to make a difference in the community, how to start small but carry out a big change with little influence. The speaker spoke about, which sources, communities or websites are legitimate and authentic. How should one distinguish? So I'll repeat that. I'm sorry. As a student, to make a difference in the community, how to start small but carry out a big change with little influence. Which sources or communities and websites are legitimate and authentic? How should one distinguish? If I might pipe in, you could join the youth empowerment program with Swamiji. But no, more seriously.
I think to you, my point of view is there is nothing big or small in it. And I think maybe Swamiji also spoke about it and Guruji also spoke about that. Basically, we can start, I think most of us as human beings aspire to be happy. I think that is perhaps a universal aspiration. And my own view is one way to be happy is by giving. And giving is a big word, but a smile is also giving. Giving a smile to a person is a gift, is giving. So therefore, coming to your question, I'm thinking if you are interested, if you're a student, if you're good at something, you can perhaps take small tutorials free of cost, teach some kids. That is one thing you could do. You can go to many schools. There are good foundations which are available where you can go to and then perhaps enroll as a part-time teacher there. So I can again recommend, to Milan's point, I can pitch in. I work with Akanksha Foundation. So if you're interested, I'll basically connect you to them. They do a bunch of good work, I think. So therefore, my view is there is nothing big or small. It is always important to make a start. And I think start by saying that we do it for ourselves. We don't do it for others. But in doing it for ourselves, I think giving is also a gift to oneself and to be happy. And I think that's the way I would look at it. There's nothing big or small. Decide on what you want to do and begin your journey there. And I think, build from there. So I think that's the way it is. So that's what I would say.
Beautifully said it. I, again, speaking from my life's experience, I will say, don't start with this mental block that I have less influence. You have a core calling. You want to do something that you think is important. Just go out. The world will surprise you in terms of how much they will stand behind you. But it will come from known and unknown quarters, and where you are very sure you're going to get help, you may not get at all. You should not be disappointed. Just keep going and you will be surprised. I can say from my personal experience that for a good cause done with a good intention, the amount of help and energy that is there in this world will be humbling.
Thank you so much, Renuka-ji. Yes, I think with this we come to the conclusion of the first session. On behalf of Chinmaya Mission Mumbai, we thank both our speakers. Truly, truly thank you very much for sparing the time and sharing your thoughts with us.